Welcome back. I recently had the opportunity to speak with one of my favorite authors, Gayle Forman. She is the best-selling author of If I Stay. This was also made into a major motion picture that premiered at Sundance a few years ago. And she has a brand new book called The Wickeds, released this holiday season, where she examines wicked stepmothers and kind of their motivations, their real true stories. Really a great conversation with her. Let's take a look.
Today I have the distinct honor of speaking with journalist and best-selling author Gayle Forman. She takes on the evilest women in literature in The Wicked. She's here to tell us more about this book. Gayle, thanks for joining us here on Park City Television.
It's good to be here, Christine.
Very much looking forward to talking with you. In fact, my daughter and I both loved your book, If I Stay.
Yay!
We both watched the movie here in Park City when it premiered at Sundance, so really am excited to talk with you.
Oh, that makes me happy. I like mother-daughter movie outings and book readings.
Well, and let's start with If I Stay. That really launched you to become this international sensation. Of course, it was adapted on screen. Tell me a little bit more about that book and what motivated you to write it.
You know, it was so strange that all of that happened from If I Stay, because I remember when I wrote the book from the sort of corner of my family's living room, it was just this very quiet moment. And I was writing a very personal story because years before we lost our two best friends and their two young children in a car accident, much like the one that's depicted in If I Stay. And one of the children lived a little longer than the rest of the family and was medevaced. And that was the thing that really stuck with me, this little boy alone on this chopper, and the rest of his family gone. And I always wondered, did he know that they'd gone? And did he choose to go with them? Because in the end, they all died. And sort of 8 years later, that sort of story came back to me with this fictional character, this young woman cellist. And I sort of sat down and I knew I was going to write that question, like, what would you do if you could choose from this fictional character's point of view?
Oh, I had no idea. That's really an impressive thing to do with such a horrible tragedy, to bring this to life, and I know it affected so many readers. And now you've written something a little different, but still for young adults and adults as well, called The Wickeds. Tell me more about that.
The Wickeds is something that's so different for me in so many ways. I mean, I write contemporary, I write mostly realistic. I mean, If I Stayed, me is out of body, but that's as sort of fantasy as I get. And so to have this opportunity to play with fairy tales and give them your own twist, it was so much fun. And it was so fun to sort of explore it through humor and to go back and to read the original fairy tales, knowing that we could kind of retell them however we wanted. So I would say that this is probably the most fun I've ever had writing anything. It was an utter delight to write about these sort of three wicked stepmothers and the story you think you know, but that is possibly wrong.
Well, and the original stories, the original fairy tales are so different from many of the adaptations that have happened. So tell me a little bit more about what makes yours unique.
I think what makes mine unique is the fact that you really are hearing the stories of the wicked stepmothers. So I tell this story about the three so-called wicked stepmothers, Snow Whites, Cinderella's, and Rapunzel's. And when you read them on page, they're all horrible. They've done terrible things. And notably, they're also all sort of stepmothers or abductresses. And as I was reading, there were such interesting things that don't come across in sort of the modern day sort of animated versions that we all know so well. For instance, Cinderella's father was not dead. He was around. So I'm like, so where was this guy, as the stepmother was supposedly being so terrible to Cinderella? And Snow White, when I sort of read about the mirror, which we all know, I was like, God, what a gaslighting mirror, telling her these horrible things, and don't many of our own mirrors do the same? And so the same with Rapunzel. And so as I started thinking about them and reading the original source material, the sort of version that I wrote about these three women kind of coming together, they've been vilified, they've been ostracized, they're middle-aged, nobody wants to hear from them anymore, they're just tabloid fodder, coming together because they feel so betrayed by their daughters, who they raised as actual daughters, not stepdaughters, and coming together to kind of, like, spoiler alert, go kill the daughters. And along the way, they find out that maybe it wasn't the daughters that are the source of their misery after all.
Oh, I love it. When you take a step back and really think about these individuals critically and their motivations and their lives, you created this incredibly engaging story. And it's being released as part of a collection called Far Away, with books by some other authors as well.
Yeah, it's all-star lineup. You have Rainbow Rowell, Nick Stone, Soman Chainani, and Ken Liu, and it's all. I can't wait to read all of their stories because it just came out today. But every week they sort of came to different authors and they said, "What would you do if you could sort of retell a fairy tale?" And it was great because instead of retelling one fairy tale, I said, "Can I retell the stories of these sort of wickeds that we know from three fairy tales and sort of set them on a different story?" So it's really fun. And I mean, I think that's something that happens with fairy tales over and over again. They're constantly being readapted. The ones that we know, there's the old the Grimm fairy tales, which maybe you've read as a kid. They are truly grim. And there's so many wonderful retellings of those. I love Adam Gidwitz has a wonderful series that sort of retells these fairy tales. And then they're so ripe with a modern interpretation because they really are touching on themes that are sort of always there. And yes, the happily ever after Prince Charming theme you've heard about a lot, but the thing that kept coming to me, and maybe this will resonate with you because you have a daughter, is just the mother-daughter friction of all of this. There's a reason that the Grimm wrote these tales about stepmothers because it was too taboo to write anything negative about a mother. But I think there's something too, the sort of the complication and the deep intensity of the mother-daughter relationship that was so fun to play with. And especially in the Wickeds, it's three generations because it's the granddaughters of the Wickeds who are actually telling this story. And you can kind of see the history repeating itself until they decide maybe they don't want it to repeat itself anymore.
Oh, it's fascinating, so intriguing. I'm looking forward to reading this. How can we get it? It comes out today, in fact.
It's out today. It's free. You can either read it or listen to it free on Amazon if you're a Prime member. Otherwise, I think it's $1.99 per story. So you can go and get. I love an audio, so I've been listening to the audio this morning. So it's available today.
And what's next for you? What are you working on?
I have two different books coming out in 2021, a YA book called We Are Inevitable and another book that we'll be announcing pretty soon. So I'll give you a sneak peek of that. And then I'm working on the next things as well. So just always juggling multiple projects. It's fun.
Well, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you, Gayle. Looking forward to reading The Wickeds. I'm honestly probably going to read it today and then read it with my daughter as well.
I love that. I love Mother-Daughter Book Club. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you so much for talking with us, Gayle.
Take care.